Never said that everybody could buy a letter, so everybody would have a part in it. And the Torah was written, it was all done, there was a lot of details, they wrote it up. The way it works is that when you write the Torah initially, there's a certain ceremony that it's connected to. And when you finish the Torah writing, there's another ceremony. When you write it, people come, and everybody that's there is honored with writing one letter just to get it started. Of course, there's a scribe there because not everybody could write a letter in the Torah. So the scribe helps you write it. And sometimes people prefer that the scribe actually writes it, but I'm just holding on to his hand. So it's as if I'm writing the letter. People are honored. They write one verse, two verses, three or four. And then everybody, it says l'chaim, give bracha, it should be successful. Either a year later or months later, they finally come to the point where they're finishing it. And when you finish writing it again, people are invited to write letters to finish the Torah scroll. And when they finish it, then there's a whole procedure. The procedure is that you take the Torah scroll and you dance with it through the streets, and you dance with it under a chuppah, like a bride and a groom are under a chuppah. That's how they dance with the Torah scroll. People around there, mostly children, are holding like certain torches in their hand or fire. You march through the streets and you bring it to the shul, whichever shul it is that you're going to bring the Torah scroll to. The Torah scrolls in the shul come out to greet the new Torah. But being that Torah scrolls can't walk, so people hold them and they take the Torah scrolls out. But the idea is that the Torah scrolls are coming out to sort of greet and welcome the new Torah that's going to join them. And of course, all this goes along with singing and music. And then they do something similar to what we do on Simchas Torah, which means we say a similar prayer, which the verse is known as Ata Haresa. Then we do Hakafas, 7 times dancing. People are honored to hold the Torah, to dance with the Torah, and then they finally bring it into the place. So when the previous Rebbe had this written, they wrote up the whole Torah, except for a few lines. And we're waiting for the Rebbe to say, okay, now the time has come to make the ceremony to finish. But he never did that. The way it was finished, I guess, within the year, they waited, and he didn't, he said it wasn't the time yet to finish it. And it was never finished. So where was this Torah all this time? It was in 770. It was kept in a special room. But again, there were no sticks to the Torah. It was just a parchment. And everything was written except for the last few lines. And I remember when I was in yeshiva studying in 770, once a month, the previous Rebbe's secretary, his name was Rabbi Simpson, he would come in and ask one of the boys of yeshiva to help him take the entire scroll and roll it from beginning to end. Because a scroll like that, if you don't use it, it gets moldy. So you have to air it out. So you would roll it. Normally you use it so you don't have to worry about it. But if you're not using it, at least to just go through the whole thing from beginning to end once a month. And that's what he was doing for years. 1970, when the Rebbe our Rebbe was leading Hasidim, a few weeks before Yud Shvat, which is the day of passing of the previous Rebbe, that year would mark 20 years from the passing of the previous Rebbe. The Rebbe said that the time has come to finish that Torah scroll. And anyone who wants to participate, again, could participate by buying a letter in that Torah scroll. And the day that was designated to finish it would have been the 10th of Shvat, but that year, the 10th of Shvat, which is the day of passing of the previous Rebbe, was on Shabbos. So it was done as close as possible. It was Friday, and Friday after midday. There was the ceremony was done, there was a gathering, and the Rebbe was the one, everyone was honored with something else. The Rebbe was honored with putting the crown on the Torah, and people read different verses, and then the Rebbe carried it to the place where the ark is, with singing and dancing, and then the Rebbe said a minor Hasidic discourse. And now, even though we don't understand all these things, we do understand, though, that to write a Torah scroll, to greet Mashiach, was really something unusual, something exceptional. And it was definitely done because of the time that we're in, that we're closer to that time of Mashiach. The fact that the previous Rebbe delayed the time and didn't finish it in the 1940s meant that it wasn't yet close enough. The fact that the Rebbe did indicate we should finish it now meant that we're now closer. So it was always viewed that the writing of that Torah scroll in 1970 meant that we reached a certain milestone. We sort of turned a certain corner in terms of our closeness to Mashiach. This Torah scroll is in 770 in the Aruch, but they don't read from it every Shabbos. They read from it only certain designated times, basically certain holidays, special dates, and the Rebbe gave instructions when to read from it. And that's what you see in 770. It's called Mashiach Sefer Torah. It's a big Torah scroll. We're talking about something which is right now from 1940 till now is like it's over 80, almost 80 years old, more than 80 years old. So therefore, they put a plastic around it because otherwise things would shred. And they still use it to this day, waiting for the day that we'll have to be able to go out and greet Mashiach with this Torah. I don't know if you realize there's another Torah, which is a small Torah, they call that the Rebbe Sefer Torah. So what is this and what is that? The big one is Mashiach Sefer Torah. The little one means the Rebbe used this Torah scroll to dance with on Hakafos. The big one, by the way, the one that's Mashiach Sefer Torah, is actually very, very heavy. I can tell you from personal experience. What's the personal experience? One of my children became bar mitzvah, and he was called up to the Torah on a special date. It was Yud Beis Tammuz. So because it was a special day, they read from this Torah scroll. And one of the things they honor you with is picking up the Torah scroll. Because it was my son. At bar mitzvah, they honored me with picking it up. I had no clue. I picked it up and it started shaking. In fact, the Rebbe was standing right next to me, put up his hand to catch it. It's very heavy because in those days they made parchment different than today, like everything else. It was very heavy. But the Rebbe would dance by a compass with a small Torah, and that Torah also has a history to it. It's a long story. Won't go into all the details, but someone actually wrote almost an entire book just covering the story of this Torah scroll. But to make a long story short, that Torah scroll is a Torah scroll that had to do with Mesiras Nefesh, with two people who had, were ready. They basically put their life on their line for Yiddishkeit. They were two brothers. Their last name was Shapiro. They were both tzaddikim, and they were sons of a very big tzaddik called Reb Pinchas Karitzer. And they owned the printing press. They used to print a lot of Torah books, books of Chassidus. But at that time, there was a big war going on, that's when the Enlightenment movement began. These were people who were against Torah through Judaism. And they tried to stop everything and anything that would promote Torah teaching. So they knew that one of the things that's very powerful is the teachings of Chassidus. And therefore, they tried to close down these printing presses. How do you close down a printing press? The guy has a business. So, there's a good old-fashioned way to do things. You go to the government, you file some false accusation that these people did this, that, or whatever wrong, and therefore they should be put into jail. Unfortunately, Russia is a very Jew-loving country, the regime. No, it wasn't the regime, it was the times of the Tsar, who also was not a Jew lover. And they considered them guilty of a crime which they never did. And these two brothers were put into jail for 20 years. And before jail, they had to go through 1,500 lashes, which means there were two rows of soldiers from each side with whips in their hand. And they had to go through 3 times. There were 500 soldiers, and they had to go through 3 times to get 1,500 lashes. After the lashes, they were in the hospital for a year. And then for the next 19 years, they spent in jail. And one of the outstanding things of that story is that they went without any shirt on their back, their hands tied behind their back. And while they was walking, they knocked off their yarmulke, the kippah. and the guy stopped. He wouldn't walk without it. If you don't walk without it, there's no way you can survive, because as it is, look how sick they became. If you stand in one place and they keep beating you, you wouldn't survive. But what happened was a very interesting thing. No one expected it. The judge told him to stop. He himself walked over, picked up the kippah, put it back on his head, and he continued to walk. And the reason why he did that, even though a kippah is not like desecrating Shabbos or desecrating Yom Kippur, but that was a war between Torah and forces that are trying to uproot Torah. So even a little thing like a kippah would be like a defeat for Torah and a win for those forces that are against Torah. And they felt for that, there's nothing that's going to stop them. They'll even put their life on the line. So they were in jail for 20 years. And during their time in jail, someone sent them a gift, a Torah scroll, this little Torah scroll that you see in 770. This is a story that happened like 100, I don't know, close to 200 years ago. A little Torah scroll. And in a jail in those days, the conditions were not conditions that you could read from a regular Torah scroll, because it wasn't clean in those days. It had no bathrooms. It was not a proper place for a Torah scroll. But what was, they gave him just the pieces of parchment without sewing it together. So halachically, it didn't have the laws of the Torah scroll. When they went out of jail, of course, they took it with them and they sewed it together. It was very precious. This Torah scroll was with them when they were in jail for these 20 years. And now you need sticks. So what happened was that somebody had sent their father, who was a great Hasidic Rebbe. He had written a Torah scroll, and someone sent them as a gift sticks to use for the Torah scroll. And what happened was that it came late, and he didn't wait for it. He used some other sticks. That person, of course, was not happy, but he said, I'm going to hold on to them, and I'm going to use it for something else. And then he added, and one day, these sticks will be in the hands of a very great tzaddik. So these, because it was the same size, they used the sticks for their Torah scroll. And it was in the family for many generations. In the early 1950s, one of the people of the family who had the Torah scroll in his possession, he was in desperate need financially, and someone offered him and said, listen, you don't sell the Torah scroll, but if you would give this Torah scroll as a gift to the Rebbe, I will give you the money you need to pull you out of your financial crisis. And he agreed. In fact, you can look in the Rebbe's letters, you see correspondence between the Rebbe and this person, thanking him, and he gave this gift to the Rebbe. So this Torah scroll was always used, and they would read from this Torah scroll every Monday and every Thursday. The Rebbe would be called up to the Torah. And for the dancing, the Rebbe used that's the Rebbe's Torah scroll. And I think it's very precious to the Rebbe, because this is a Torah scroll that's connected to people who put their life on the line for Torah and mitzvahs. And that's the small Torah. And the big Torah is Mashiach Sefer Torah. So this is just to give a little bit of the background. Look at, again, you're in the 10th chapter. Look at where page number 1, where it says, before Hakafas, which means before the dancing of Simchas Torah in the year 5702, the Rebbe Rayatz, the previous Rebbe, announced that a Sefer Torah is going to be written especially for the purpose of greeting our righteous Mashiach. The writing was intended to begin on the 20th day of Cheshvan, and that stage was intended to begin publicly, like a big ceremony. At the end, it was postponed, and the day it was done was many months later, Beis Ir, which means it was done after Pesach, after Passover. It's the birthday of the Rebbe Marash, the 4th Rebbe of Chabad. And instead of making a public event, it was done as a very small, private event. There's an explanation to all that. And let me turn to page 3. Page 3, you have the description of what happened when it was completed in 1970. Being that you can all read English, I'm going to leave it with you to read the details. Some of them I already told you. Some you'll see more details here. I just remember one thing, that the Rebbe walked in carrying a box. We never saw the Rebbe carrying a box. And everybody was like puzzled, what could the Rebbe be carrying in a box? Someone else was carrying the Torah scroll, the Rebbe's secretary. Actually, the previous Rebbe's secretary was carrying the Torah scroll. He was there when the previous Rebbe wrote it in the first place. And the Rebbe himself was carrying a box. Nobody knew what was in the box. Couldn't even guess. Turns out what was in the box was the silver crown. In Chabad, for some reason or other, none of the Torahs had crowns. From that point on, all the Torahs got crowns. But that was the first time they did it. And I said people given honors. One person was given honor to lift the Torah, another person was given honor to tie it together, another person was given the honor to read certain things. And the Rebbe's honor was to put the crown on the Torah scroll. And you'll see more details here.
But wait, where did he get the
What?
crown from? Where did he get the crown from?
The crown was made here in New York, but the Rebbe was very involved in the design of the crown. He wanted it to be a very specific way. So this is the crown that you see now on the Torah book. Yep. Now I want to go to number 11. As we said, from time to time, the Rebbe intensified the focus on Mashiach. The last thing we learned that was sort of a new stage in the Rebbe's focus on Mashiach was in 1980, when the Rebbe began that Hashem is waiting for us to demand Mashiach and to ask for Mashiach. That's when the song was composed, We Want Mashiach Now. And then every other Farbrengen, the Rebbe spoke about the importance of wanting Mashiach and letting Hashem know that we want Mashiach. The next stage, which was the next stage where sort of the whole campaign of Mashiach and the awareness of Mashiach and the focus of Mashiach took on a whole new level, was page 11. The time of redemption has arrived. What is that about? So this goes back to 1990, rather 1990, summer of 1990, right before 91, right before, it was Elul, means right before Rosh Hashanah. And that's when out there in the world, there was something called the Persian Gulf Crisis. Persian Gulf Crisis is which, I remember very clearly, Iraq was then controlled by a dictator whose name was Saddam Hussein, and he invaded a country called Kuwait. Kuwait is the most richest country in the Middle East in terms of oil. So he invaded that country. Why? Because he wanted their oil. Very simple. It's not right? Oh, that doesn't matter. Okay. He invaded the country. And of course, America and all the other countries, United Nations, they came out against him. And they threatened him that he was not going to comply. They're going to use military force. And his response was that if you attack me, I will attack Israel. What's the connection? No connection. There's no attack Israel. And these weren't only words, but he actually prepared missiles that were pointing towards Israel. And this was called the Persian Gulf Crisis. So for a few months, they were negotiating with him. And then they saw that negotiation is not helping. Then they attacked. That's when the war began. So it was the Persian Gulf Crisis. Then there was the Persian Gulf War. When the crisis started, it was the month of Elul, right before Rosh Hashanah. And the Rebbe said these words. We already see the sign. Look at where it says on top, Besuras Geula. It's the name of a book. The Rebbe says, we see the signs which our sages identify the end of exile and the times of redemption that are being fulfilled, including the recently publicized sign in Yalkut Shemaini. Yalkut Shemaini is the name of a medrash. And of course, these are the same sages that wrote the Mishnah. And over there it says the following. Rabbi Yitzchak said, in the year that King Mashiach will be revealed, the kings of all the nations of the world will struggle with each other. The king of Persia will provoke the Arabian king. The Arabian king will go to Aram for advice. All the nations of the world will be in turmoil and terror. They will fall on their faces, seized by pains like the pangs of childbirth. Israel will also be in turmoil and terror, saying, where shall we come? Where shall we go? Where shall we come? Where shall we go? And God will say to them, my children, do not be afraid. All that I've done only for your sake. Why are you afraid? Do not fear. The time of your redemption has arrived. And this will not be like the early redemptions. This redemption is going to be different because suffering and subjugation to other nations, that followed the early redemptions. Jews went out of Egypt, but then there was another exile. They went out of that, and there was another exile. They went out of that, there was another exile. But the final redemption will not be followed by any suffering, any subjugation to other nations. In other words, this redemption will be forever. And then it concludes. Our sages taught us that King Mashiach comes, he will stand on the roof of the Beis Hamikdash, and he will proclaim, humble ones, the time of your redemption has arrived. And the Rebbe concluded with a blessing, so should it be for us. From the outset, there's nothing to fear. What does it mean? People in Israel wanted to leave. People in other countries who made plans to go to Israel wanted to change their plans. And the Rebbe gave instructions, nobody should leave and nobody should change their plans. If anyone's planning to go to Israel. And you're worried about what's going to happen. The Rebbe said, nothing's going to happen. The only thing that will happen is we'll be seeing big miracles. They're not fear. And so it'll be for us, and we should be merit to see Mashiach on the roof of the Beis Hamikdash, proclaiming that the redemption is already here. Yeah, so this is a metaphoric way of saying he's going to stand on the roof of the Beis Hamikdash. But one thing is clear, the Rebbe is saying that this war or this crisis that we were seeing, not to be afraid, because actually it's a sign that the process of redemption is moving forward. That's what the Rebbe told us. What actually happened? There were two major things that indicate the miracle that happened. Turn the page, and you see a page that says on top, U.S. was ready for. You see this page? It comes from the internet, but you can all look up more details. Just to give you an idea of what was going on. The United States, this is about the war, was ready for 20,000 casualties. Schwarzkopf was the general of that war. He tells this was a session in the White House, and the senators, he told them that this is what they expected. Look at the words. Schwarzkopf broke a long official silence on the question of expected war casualties. He told this to a Senate committee at the outbreak of the war. The U.S. forces in the region had in place, listen to the numbers, 18,000 hospital beds, 65 facilities, staffed with 41,000 medical professionals to handle the expected heavy flow of casualties. And the worst case scenario was they were expecting 20,000 casualties. What happened at the end? Look at the other line that's underlined. Actual American combat casualties during the 43-day war was 147 people killed and 357 wounded. Again, 147 people, that's a lot. But compared to 20,000, it's almost nothing. So this was basically what the Rebbe was saying, that this war and the winning of this war, first of all, they thought it would last much longer. Look what's happening now in Israel. They thought this war would go on and on and on and on. You know that Iraq and Iran had a war that lasted for, I think, 10 years. This war was over in 43 days. And this was what happened in Israel. In Israel, he did keep his promise. No one doubted that he would keep his promise. And he sent 39 Scud missiles to Israel. But again, the miracle was that one single person was killed from 39 Scud missiles. Buildings were hit, buildings collapsed, other things were done, damage was done, but no life was lost as a result of the missiles that they sent there. The Rebbe said that these were miracles that we witnessed. And it says in the Torah that before Mashiach comes, we're going to see miracles just like we saw in Egypt. And the Rebbe said clearly these are the miracles that we are seeing, even though people think of a miracle like splitting of the sea. Someone's flying in the air. That's not necessarily a miracle. Anything that happens that according to expectations of the experts, this is not what was meant to happen, and didn't expect this to happen, it didn't appear that logically and naturally this should be happening. And if that happens, that is a miracle. For example, just to give a simple example, if somebody is in a, God forbid, a car accident, And this car accident, like the story that I told you about myself, and this car accident, the people that are experts in the field don't believe that everybody got out alive, but they didn't expect such an accident, such a fire. That means it's a miracle. What does it mean it's a miracle? I'm talking about halacha. Halacha means if I would go back to that spot, I have to make a bracha and say, I thank you, Hashem, for the miracle that occurred here. So the definition of miracle is not necessarily you see somebody doing something like this, that the sea is standing or things of that type. Anything that happens that, according to nature, a doctor says there's no way in the world that this can change. It's impossible. And it changes and the person is healed, that is a miracle. So therefore, this is what the experts expected, and this is what happened. 39 missiles should fall on a country, and none of it cannot even kill one single person, is an absolute miracle. Look what's happening now. First of all, in some ways, the miracle today is even greater because Israel received 300 missiles a day for a year. 300 missiles a day versus 39. And the missiles that were sent are much more powerful than those 39 in those days. And yet, the numbers, unfortunately, people lost their lives, but you can't even compare the numbers of what one expects. Iran attacked us twice, one time with, I think, 300 missiles, ballistic missiles, second time with 400 ballistic missiles. Yes, you can say America did this, and they had that, and they had this. It's all, everyone agrees that the more you know the military, you know that it's miracles. There's a second part of this miracle is Saddam Hussein was known to use chemical weapons on his own people. So that's the next page you could look at, why Saddam never used chemical weapons in the Gulf War. The whole article, and again, you can go online and see more about it. It's very clear that he gave instructions. He clearly told his generals, and because America, when we went in, we took away his computers, we took away any kind of recordings, and they have recordings of his meetings. And in the meetings, which took place days before the war, you hear him telling the generals that if anything happens to him, they should use chemical weapons. And not only that, they told him to fill it, to prepare it, to do it, but there were no chemical warheads. You probably, if you ever read the story, Israel then gave out masks to every single person should have a gas mask. In case there are chemical weapons that should protect us. People put plastics on their homes that should be blocking the chemicals. So that was another miracle because chemical weapons, God forbid, that would do much more damage. I mean, that's what COVID was all about. It was a chemical that spread, and look what it did. So that was another part of the miracle. And basically, what it means is that when this happened, this was, again, not only a sign that we're close to Mashiach. The way the Rebbe explained it is, if you listen to the words, the time of your redemption has arrived, which means we're already in the process. This is the redemption unfolding, that Hashem is performing miracles for us. We would like much more to happen, and we'd like it to happen much faster, but we don't know why Hashem is stretching it like that, but this is part of the process of the miracles that are happening. And in those days, the Rebbe himself was responsible for this. He wanted to pay for this. This is an ad in the New York Times. You look up here, you'll see. It was a full-page ad in the New York Times. And there was a PR person that put this together pretty brilliantly. It was like, connect the dots. First it says the fall of communism. Then it says the lightning victory of the Gulf War. Mass exodus of the Jews from Soviet Jewry. Israel unscathed by Scud missiles. Triumph of the democracy and freedom in many countries. The communist regimes in the communist countries fell, and there were no longer communist. They became democratic. Military mobilization for humanitarian relief. The end of the Cold War between America and Russia, and then you put it together. It spells Mashiach. That's the catch to it. Draw your own conclusion. And it's interesting because that's very unusual. In this case, the Rebbe wanted to pay for this ad. It became known that as if he's sending this message. So basically, from that point on, the Rebbe was urging everyone to do whatever they can to encourage Jews to realize that we're close to that time. What does it mean close to the time? If we're already in the time, but close to the time, what we're waiting for now that it should be completed. Because there are many stages in Mashiach's coming, and these miracles, as great as they are, it's only a beginning stage. It's not yet the full story. And even the fact that Jews are coming to Israel is part of the miracles happening. Thousands of Jews coming to Israel, leaving a place like Russia and coming to live in Israel. But nevertheless, it's the process sort of moving forward. And the same thing with this war, the process moving forward. At that time, before the miracles happened, when people were making plans, you see this on many videos, that people going past the Rebbe by the dollars and asking, should I go to Israel or not? And the Rebbe told everybody, how could you not go? You're going to miss seeing all the miracles. But in that time, people were not thinking of miracles. They thought that it's the biggest danger that could be. Saddam Hussein is ready to attack us. He might use chemical warheads. And many people left Israel at the time. And many people changed their plans. I remember once, at that time, I was in Manhattan. I was dealing with this person, who was a chassid, not a Chabad chassid. And he asked me, is it true that the Rebbe said that Israel is the safest place? Because it says that God has his eyes on the land all the time. And people should go there, those who had plans to go. I said, yeah, it's true. I said, how could it be? It's such a danger. He said, the Rebbe sees the outcome, and he sees that it's not going to be what people are worried about. So he whispers to me quietly and says, I understand the Rebbe said that, but why do you guys have to publicize it? It's almost like saying, the Rebbe says it, but you got to use your common sense. Don't send people to go to such a place. But if you really believe in a Rebbe, that he's a person who has an understanding that's beyond human perception, something more spiritual, and he sees the outcome. Just like other areas where the Rebbe told people things that the only way you can tell them is because you have a higher understanding. I once heard from someone that this goes years back in the 1950s. His wife had some sort of an attack. They rushed her to the hospital, and they said that they have to do emergency surgery. On the other hand, the surgery itself is very risky. But if they don't do the surgery, it's also risky. So they told the husband, you have to give us the green light. Yes or no? He was the chassid of another Rebbe in Israel. And he called his Rebbe. In those days, it wasn't like today. He couldn't get through. The lines were congested. That was the message. The lines are congested. And as much as he tried, he couldn't get through. And the doctors are calling, he must give us an answer. We can't wait with this. He lived in Crown Heights, so decided we'll go to our Rebbe, even though he's not a chassid of our Rebbe, but he can't reach his Rebbe, so go to our Rebbe. Because either way, it was a risk. He asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to him, you don't need the surgery. She'll be fine. He walked away, and he said, I still wasn't, if I would have heard this from my Rebbe, I would have felt much more confident, but I didn't have that relationship with the Rebbe. Somehow, it didn't give me the confidence. Then he said, I reasoned with myself, wait a second. A person who did not speak to a doctor, didn't see medical records, all he's doing is talking to an hysterical husband, and he's telling you, don't do the surgery. Someone like that can't be an ordinary, regular person. Either he's a person that's so low that doesn't care about other people's lives, or he's so high that he knows things that other people don't know. Well, he's definitely not on the other end of the spectrum. So it must be that he knows things that other people don't know, and he sees that it's okay for her not to do the surgery. Understand his logic. How could a Rebbe tell you don't do the surgery? It's a medical emergency. Like I said, you're not seeing the patient, you're not speaking to a doctor, you don't see a medical report, you're just hearing something from a layman, a husband, and on that basis you tell somebody don't do surgery? How could you take such a responsibility? That means because the Rebbe sees. So when this happened in the 6-day war also, the Rebbe told people they shouldn't leave Israel, there's going to be miracles. It was a little bit different, but there was I forgot his name, a big politician, a very important person here in New York, and he had a friend who was connected to the Rebbe. So he told him, have a son. He's my one and only son. He's in Israel now. We're trying to get him home. But me and my wife are hysterical. He joined Chabad, and the Rebbe tells nobody to leave. We got to get him home. I want to go in to speak to the Rebbe that he should let my son come home. So he asked this person to get an appointment for him. Usually appointments take a long time. Naturally, he's a person with a lot of influence. So usually people with a lot of influence, and for such people, because they have influence on the public, the Rebbe always made, that was more priority, because talking to that person really affects many people. I'm going to just 1 second. I remember the chief rabbi of Romania came, and he was in the Rebbe's room for about an hour and a half. Then at a certain point said, Rebbe, I want to stop. I'm taking up too much time. An hour and a half. So the Rebbe said, how many Jews are there in Romania? So he said 60,000. So the Rebbe said, an hour and a half is too much time for 60,000 people. In other words, if he's the chief rabbi of Romania and he has influence on 60,000 people, then an hour and a half is not so much time. Same thing with any person who is influential. Anyway, he got the appointment, and the first thing he did was he apologized, Rebbe, if I made the impression that I'm coming about influential things, I'm sorry, this is personal, but I had to get in. And he tells the Rebbe, me and my wife are really broken. This is our only son. We have only one child, our only child. So the Rebbe said that all the Jews that are there and all the people that are there, all my students are also one and only child. They're all the same. And if I'm telling them to stay, it's because I am very confident there's nothing to worry about. Otherwise, how could you take the responsibility to tell people to be in a war zone with so much danger, and they want to leave, and I'm telling them to stay? That's an unbelievable responsibility. The only way you can take that responsibility is if you have some higher and deeper way of knowing things, and you know with confidence that they're not going to be in danger. And that's what the Rebbe was telling us about this, same thing about this war, that this is, yes, it's a war, and there's miracles here, but the main thing was not only just that there's miracles, but to understand that these miracles are part of the process of redemption unfolding. To be continued. Have a great Shabbos, everybody.
The next class you will be here. Huh? In the next class you will be here. Yeah, why?